Janet, I will leave it there because I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Prime Minister Boris Johnson. You're on air, just so that you're aware of that. Thank you very much for coming, Prime Minister.
Good morning,
to see you.
Good morning, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm well.
Good.
Can I start by offering my condolences to you for the loss of your...
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah,
I know how desperately close you were.
Well, you're very kind. It is our human. It is.
It is.
That's right.
Well, best wishes on that. Prime Minister, your agenda is all about levelling up. How will we know when we've levelled up? What is the measure?
Well, let me give you one example of a phenomenon that's already happening. There are all sorts of ways in which we're levelling up infrastructure across the country. If you look at gigabit broadband, when I became Prime Minister, it was only 7% of the country. It's now in some of the furthest regions of the UK, some of the most hard to reach places. Now 65% remote, cottage crofts in Scotland, such as the one owned by Ian Blackford of the SNP, are now all wired up.
Well, we can all celebrate. A nation rejoices.
Nation rejoices.
Yes.
But we're now 65% on
so
that.
Is that? It's
no, but I'll give you one absolutely stark example at the moment. The wage increases that we've seen in the last year or more than a year, are being felt most intensely, or the phenomenon is most pronounced for those on lower incomes. And that is levelling up, because it is the people on lower incomes who are getting richer faster.
Just taking universal credit away.
And that is a good thing. And yes,
please don't preach to those. There are people hurting because of universal.
They are, and I understand that people feel. That people feel that times are difficult at the moment, because we've got an economy that's coming out of a very tough period with the COVID pandemic, and it's growing strongly now. We've got the fastest economic growth in the G7.
But that doesn't help a carer who's just lost 20 quid, does it?
And so that's why, and I understand how hard people work, but and how difficult things can sometimes feel. But what we're doing is making sure that we have a fund set aside for those who find it particularly tough in the coming months. £500 million we're putting into that. The increase in childcare provision, the increase in the local housing allowance. You remember, Nick?
Yes.
That I fought against those cuts when I was in London. We've put it back up again. We've put up the local housing allowance to help people.
Okay.
We've put up the warm homes discount, and so there are things and increase the living wage, by the way, which this government introduced. But what we won't do is take more money in tax to subsidise low pay and through the welfare system. And you heard Rishi yesterday. I thought he was totally right about that. That is the way forward for our country.
But it's a gamble.
The way forward for our country is high.
Is it a risk
high wage
with inflation?
High wage, high skill approach.
But if inflation, the spectre of inflation, were to return, is it a gamble worth taking?
I think that for the British economy and the British people, this is the right way forward.
You didn't address the spectre of inflation returning, looming, the elephant in the room.
I also believe that we have fantastically skilled logistics and supply chain people who will sort out some of these problems that are a function of growth, a function of life returning.
But how would that prevent inflation?
Because the market starts to clear and things become easier. What you're seeing is demand, growing demand, sucking in gas from Russia or wherever. You're seeing demand for lorry drivers globally. That has an inflationary effect. But as that clears, as supply meets demand, then inflation abates. That's the way it works. So what we're doing is making sure, say, take energy prices, right, which is a big part of people's bills and people's anxieties, and quite rightly. Well, this government is going to fix it for the long term by making investments in renewable power that we can rely on in this country. And to help people this winter, we're taking all the steps that I've just mentioned, and we will get through it very well. But this government is doing the difficult long-term things, right? We got Brexit done, which was a very difficult thing to do, and we're now going to address the big underlying issues that face the UK. Long-term lack of productivity, long-term lack of investment in energy and in infrastructure. We're going to fix that. And that will have a big downward pressure on costs.
Okay.
And that is the way to tackle inflation.
All right.
And another big share of people's weekly outgoings is housing.
Right.
It's massive. How do you fix? You look, and it's been growing.
Right.
Because of the housing shortage. So we as I told you about what we're doing with affordable housing, with the local housing allowance.
Yes.
But that's not enough.
Okay.
We've got to fix the planning system as well, so young people growing up in this country have the chance of an affordable
I wonder if
home.
I might get a question in during that. I'm very grateful. You want Britain to get back to work. You can rule out another spike in COVID then?
We've got to be humble in the face of nature, Nick, and we've got to recognise that the disease can, or a new variant, or some other another pandemic could always hit us. But the data...
Isn't that the danger of telling people, get back behind your desks?
No. Okay, well, let me be very clear. The data that I see at the moment is very clear that we are right to stick to Plan A, which is what we're on. And you remember, and that means opening up and encouraging people, but always continuing, as we said at that press conference a few weeks ago, always continuing to do sensible things like washing your hands, having ventilation, all that kind of thing, making sure you're sensible. But we are certainly encouraging people to get back to work in the normal way. And I think that's a good thing. And let me tell you why I think it's a good thing. I think that for young people in particular, it is really essential to be in if you're going to learn on the job, you can't just do it on Zoom.
No.
You've got to be able to come in and sit at the. You've got to know what everybody else is talking about.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to be gossiped about, and you're going to lose out. And
God forbid you'd ever be gossiped about.
Well, you know what I mean, Nick. And you need to be.
I would never partake in that. I can assure you.
You need to be there, and you need to have the stimulus of exchange and competition.
You're not a fan of Zoom. How many?
I've done a lot of Zoom meetings.
Have you got 100% of your staff back behind their desks?
No, I don't.
What's your percentage?
It depends.
I've got 100% back at LBC. What have you got?
Well, I congratulate you.
Yes.
I congratulate. And does that apply to the whole of Global?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Look at them, but they're all standing around.
No, most of those are yours.
Oh, okay.
How many?
Well, there you go.
What is the percentage that's got back behind their desk?
I think that the Cabinet Secretary has written a pretty good letter quite some weeks ago to everybody, telling them to get back to their desk.
But some people try to get to work and they can't, because there are people stuck to the road with banners and posters and come on, Boris Johnson, you've got to sort this out.
That is insane. And look, I mean, there are some people, Nick, who call those individuals legitimate protesters.
Are they?
They're not. I think they're irresponsible crusties who are basically trying to stop people going about their day's work and doing considerable damage to the economy. And that's why we've taken the powers, and why Priti Patel is doing the right thing to bring in powers so that they can get 6 months or an unlimited fine, or actually we've got Section 60 powers to stop and search the whole area.
And lastly, I've got to ask you, the petrol crisis. You should have done more earlier, many would say. Boris,
I think that the issue on the forecourts has been one of primarily of demand.
They're queuing in Uxbridge. You're aware of this, are you? We've spoken to them this morning.
It is a primarily overwhelmingly an issue of demand, not supply. Supply has now exceeded the.
Do you know what the price
average.
of diesel is now?
Actually,
do you know what the price of diesel was before? What were you paying for diesel, or what was it roughly?
I don't use diesel. I don't use diesel. I can tell you the price because that was all a European Union plot, as you remember, and we moved away from that. But the price of petrol is about. I would say £1.35 a
exactly.
litre.
Some poor people are paying over £2.
And I understand that. And
get the petrol out there.
Look, first thing to say is I sympathise very much with the frustrations of people who've been queuing for petrol. I really, really do, and I understand how infuriating it is when you can't get petrol at the pumps. I really understand that. But I must repeat that this has been overwhelmingly a problem of demand, not supply. You know what I mean by that.
I do know the word demand, yes.
And what I'm getting at is that the tanker drivers, the lorry drivers, they've got more than the average week's supply to the pumps for the last few days, and That is the situation. I think even the Petrol Retailers Association have been saying that the situation has been improving markedly. But what you're seeing is the UK economy coming back into life, really sort of stretching its legs, starting to move again. And there's been a bit of creaking here and there because we haven't had such activity for a long time. And as I said before, it's like getting up at half time in the cup final and everybody making a cup of tea all at once.
That's an interesting.
There's a big surge on the electricity, on the power supplies, is what I'm trying to get at. You remember?
That's your cup of tea. Okay, Prime Minister.
Okay, we done? Okay.
Well, I'd love you to say, but you have to go someplace else.
I think I've got to go.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson addressing us here. Get those people back behind their desks, Mr. Johnson, in your Prime Minister's office. Where 4 minutes after 8 on LBC, we're going to do the news.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This